some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
This hour, because there's been a development in the search for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie.
There are some puzzling new developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
I can tell you that Mrs. Guthrie had cameras plural at this home and that they were smashed. You may have heard Brian Entin from News Nation talking earlier and asking Sheriff Chris Nanos a question in the news conference, and again today. I'm recording on February the 3rd, it's a Tuesday. The press conference that was early in the day of Brian asked the sheriff the camera on the front of the house is missing, and the sheriff said we are trying to get into the companies that you know are providers of this kind of cloud information to get that, and said by today he did not have that information, did not have whatever was recorded. But I can tell you they are Nest cameras. They are Nest cameras plural, and that whoever did this may have smashed those cameras plural. So they're not there presumably because law enforcement took those smashed cameras as evidence. My law enforcement source told me that police have now towed and impounded the vehicle belonging to Nancy Guthrie's music daughter Annie Guthrie. Walking up to the front door, you could see that there was blood right outside the front door on the ground, like on the stoop, music, right there, right near the front map going in. Just, you know, not a ton of blood, but it was definitely blood. It was all right there. Nancy Guthrie had a pacemaker and it disconnected from her Apple devices, her Apple Watch, her Apple phone, which were left in the home at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and that is a significant time, and I'll tell you why that it is extraordinarily instructive, music, to this investigation. Nest cameras smashed, multiple cameras, not one, plural. Whoever entered Nancy Guthrie's home knew those cameras existed and knew where they were positioned. They smashed them, deliberately eliminating the visual record of their entry before proceeding with the abduction of an 84-year-old woman who could barely walk 50 yards on their own. And the back door was left wide open. A journalist who has known Savannah Guthrie for 20 years received information from an impeccable law enforcement source with direct knowledge of the investigation. What that source revealed goes beyond what any press conference has disclosed. Blood confirmed inside the house, a family member's vehicle towed and impounded as evidence, and the investigative focus narrowing in a direction that has shaken everyone connected to the case. My law enforcement source tells me that the back door of the Guthrie home was the door that was left wide open. Was it the point of entry? Was it the point of egress? Don't know that. But it was open, wide open, and it was in the back, not the front. Brian Entin saw blood at the front door. So, did a struggle happen at the front door? Was there a doorbell rung at 2 a.m.? Why was the back door open? Lot of questions there, but the back door, according to my law enforcement source, was left wide open. Back door wide open. Blood at the front door. Two separate locations. Two separate pieces of evidence that suggest a sequence of events moving through the house. Entry from one direction, exit from another. And a confrontation somewhere in between that produced the blood that Brian Entin found on the front stoop when he walked up to a house that was no longer a crime scene. The crime scene had been released to the family after approximately 24 hours of processing. The tape came down. Law enforcement vehicles departed. And when Entin approached the front door to knock, he found blood on the ground near the front mat. Visible. Still red. Not cleaned. Not covered. Just sitting there on the stoop of a house that had been turned back over to the family the evening before. And above the door, where a Nest camera had been mounted near what appeared to be a doorbell position, the camera was gone. An investigative reporter confirmed that the cameras were Nest cameras, not Ring cameras as had been previously reported. They were smashed, not simply removed or disconnected. The physical act of smashing implies tools, implies force, implies someone who arrived prepared to destroy surveillance equipment before the kidnapping began. And whoever did it knew there were multiple cameras, not just one. That level of familiarity with the property's security infrastructure points towards someone who had been inside or around the home before. The pacemaker data provides the timestamp. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker was connected to her Apple Watch and Apple phone via Bluetooth. When the pacemaker moves out of Bluetooth range from those devices, which were left inside the home, the connection breaks. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, that disconnection occurred. Not because the pacemaker stopped working. Not because Nancy died. Because the person wearing the pacemaker was physically moved out of range of the devices it was paired with. That is the moment investigators believe Nancy was taken from her house. And if you want to follow how the camera evidence, the blood analysis, and the pacemaker timeline converge, make sure you're subscribed, because in this case, every update has changed what we thought we knew. This is important because you've heard that the last point of contact with Nancy Guthrie was when she was dropped off by her daughter at 9:45-ish at night on Saturday night. So, Annie Guthrie, and possibly her husband as well, Tommaso Cioni, were the last people to see her at 9:45 at night, Saturday night. Sunday morning, 11 a.m., church members reach out to the family, "Hey, your mom wasn't in church, not normal. She's always there. What's up?" Family member goes over, calls family member remembers, goes to the house, calls 911, and the investigation begins. But, they have towed Annie Guthrie's car. Annie Guthrie's vehicle has been towed and impounded, placed into evidence. Annie is Nancy Guthrie's daughter, Savannah's sister, and the family member who dropped Nancy off at her home the evening before the disappearance. She and her husband, Thomas Oshin, were the last people known to have seen Nancy alive. And their car, the vehicle Nancy was riding in when she was brought home that evening, is now in law enforcement custody. The law enforcement source described the investigative logic directly. Who takes an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility? It is a burden for a kidnapper. An elderly woman who cannot walk more than 50 yards, who needs daily medication to survive, who has no capacity to be forced to move quickly or far. Thomas Oshin, were the last people known to have seen Nancy alive. And their car, the vehicle Nancy was riding in when she was brought home that evening, is now in law enforcement custody. The law enforcement source described the investigative logic directly. Who takes an 84-year-old woman with limited mobility? It is a burden for a kidnapper. An elderly woman who cannot walk more than 50 yards, who needs daily medication to survive, who has no capacity to be forced to move quickly or far. Taking her is not the act of a burglar who was surprised and improvised. It is the act of someone who had a specific reason to want this particular woman to disappear. And investigators look at people who would have a benefit from that disappearance. Insurance benefits, debts, financial entanglements. The source identified Annie Guthrie's husband as someone investigators were looking at closely, possibly as a prime suspect in the earliest phase of the investigation. The source was careful to note that families are always examined first. The concentric circles of investigation begin at the center, the people closest to the victim, and expand outward. Ed Smart was investigated in the disappearance of his daughter Elizabeth before it was discovered that a stranger, Brian David Mitchell, had entered the home and taken her. The process is standard. It is necessary. And it does not always mean that the family member being examined is guilty. But towing and impounding a vehicle is a loud move. It is not a routine interview. It is not a voluntary DNA swab. It is the seizure of physical evidence under legal authority. And the question the law enforcement source raised is whether investigators would take that step, towing the car of Savannah Guthrie's sister, generating the media attention and family disruption that inevitably follows, unless there were something more substantial driving the decision. This isn't like a normal neighborhood actually. It's right in the foothills. Eve. Cactus, brush, desert terrain that is not designed for pedestrian movement, especially not at 2 o'clock in the morning with an 84-year-old woman who needs assistance walking. The environment itself constrains the possibilities. Whoever took Nancy needed a vehicle close to the house because she could not have been walked any significant distance. And the darkness that should have provided cover for the perpetrator also eliminates the kind of ambient light that residential security cameras rely on to capture usable footage. The Nest cameras were the primary defense and they were destroyed. Not circumvented, not blocked with a hand or a piece of tape, smashed. Which means the footage they captured before being smashed, the approach, the first moments of the perpetrator's presence at the house, may exist on the Nest cloud servers if the cameras were transmitting before they were destroyed. At the time of the interview, law enforcement was still waiting for the Nest Corporation to provide access to whatever data those cameras transmitted before they went offline. The sheriff expressed frustration at the delay. 72 hours had passed and the camera data still had not been delivered. Blood inside the house. Blood outside the house. The back door wide open. Nest cameras smashed. A pacemaker disconnecting at 2 a.m. A family vehicle towed into evidence. Cell phone pings and geofencing data being analyzed to determine every device that was in the vicinity during the window of the abduction.